Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here, got another Master Duel video for y'all. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Duelist Cup, but we're not looking at the meta just yet. I do actually want to do that, but I want to wait until we get to the end of this initial period of the Duelist Cup, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at all of the decks that hit max level, and then we can do a little meta analysis slash breakdown about that. But one thing that is pretty widely known about the Duelist Cup at this point is that Konami definitely likes to use the metrics and data from them to determine what to hit on the next ban list. So, we can pretty much always expect a significant ban list update to follow one of these Duelist Cups. So I decided it might be fun to try to predict what all is going to get hit on the ban list following the Duelist Cup. Now, one thing I do want to note about these predictions is this isn't necessarily what I think should be hit, but rather what I think Konami will hit. And in each of these cards that we're going to talk about, we'll talk about where they are at, not only in Master Duel currently, but in the TCG and OCG as far as their legality, what the shifts that Konami is likely to make will be, and then the reasoning behind that. But then I'll also kind of throw in a little personal anecdote of what I think of that card. So again, just want to make that clear. These predictions are based on what I think Konami will do. They're not necessarily what I think should be done, although sometimes that thought process will also line up as well. So let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. The first card I want to address here is going to be Fairy Tale Snow. This is a very highly used card in this current metagame. It's used in pretty much every 60 card pile slash Shizu deck that's out there, and in fact we even see the Necroface kind of chaos mill decks often being able to mill the opponent out because of Fairy Tale Snow being able to so easily banish cards from the graveyard. So this card is currently at 3 in Master Duel, 0 in the TCG, and 3 in the OCG. So this is one of those clear discrepancies between the TCG and OCG. And in fact, that's going to be the case with a lot of these cards that we're going to see getting hit. One of the common threads that you'll see me kind of follow is that Master Duel does tend to pretty closely align with the OCG's ban list, at least more so than the TCG. So that will often be at least part of the basis of where I think a card will get hit. That's actually not going to be the case here though, because even though this card is at 3 in the OCG, my prediction is that this card is actually going to end up going from 3 copies down to 1. The reason behind this is that Konami has actually been shown to a willingness to limit certain cards that are powerful but not like limited at all in the OCG, like Block Dragon and Amano Iwata are the big ones. Those are both at 3 in the OCG, but they have been hit to 1 in Master Duel for the sake of the health of the Master Duel format. So I could easily see a case where Fairy Tale Snow is the same. They don't usually hit ultra rare rarity cards like this to such a degree, but I think this is a case where even Konami might be willing to give us a couple, or at least for those who have 3 Fairy Tale Snow, give them a couple of free Ultra Rares to make sure that this card is relatively healthy. Let's go ahead and go through the rest of my reasoning, and then I'll get into my personal opinion. So, this card in multiples allows for Necroface mill decks to function, but limiting so would make the deck less consistent. Being at 1 means graveyard decks can still use but not abuse Fairy Tale Snow in this way. Despite that though, I do think this card should be at 0. Fairy Tale Snow is an absurdly powerful card. The fact that it's not once per turn at all, and that you can do it multiple times per chain link is absolutely ridiculous. Like, you can't even call by or use a shuffler against the card for that reason. And there's a lot of strategies that really want to banish cards, and Fairy Tale Snow just allows them a very easy way to do it in mass, and especially at multiple copies. I don't think limiting this card will necessarily kill those like Ishizu Chaos decks. They definitely won't be able to mill you quite as easily. But I don't know, again, I think this card should be at 0, but I think Konami will put it at 1. That's kind of like the epitome of what I was talking about earlier when I said, this is more about what I think Konami is going to do versus what I think should be done. And yeah, even though this card is still at 3 in the OCG, I don't know, maybe we'll see it limited soon. The thing is that Konami does have an OCG list coming up as well, and we'll see this more later on with some of my later predictions, but I do think there's a chance that some of the hits in the OCG could coincide with some of the hits around the same time here in Master Duel. So I could see Fairy Tale Snow going to 1 in both formats possibly. I don't actually think Fairy Tale Snow is doing a whole lot in the OCG right now, so this could be a Master Duel exclusive hit, which are, again, rare, but You know, we have seen them before again in stuff like Block Dragon and Amano Iwado. Alright, so that's the big one. I think even though, again, this is an ultra rare, I think this is a card that definitely should get hit, and I really hope will. It seems like a pretty obvious hit to me, but, you know, Konami has definitely passed up on some seemingly obvious hits in the past, far more than once, so... Alright, there's Fairy Tale Snow. The next card I want to talk about is actually going to be Floowandereeze and the Magnificent Map. So, this card is currently at 2 in Master Duel. Of course, as you can see, I grabbed the image from Master Duel there. Or I think this was actually from Master Duel Meta, because I know it's got this weird, like, translation text. But anyway, this card is currently at 2 in Master Duel, 3 in the TCG, but 1 in the OCG. My prediction is that this card will end up going from 2 to 1. A couple of reasons for this. Floowandereeze has been a mainstay in the Duelist Cup for pretty much the entirety of like its lifespan in Master Duel, and for every Duelist Cup that's been in Master Duel. We've always seen, like, even if Floowandereeze isn't played that much on ladder in that moment, in that specific meta, which was actually the case for this one, like, Flow is definitely around, but I don't know, at least I never consistently saw it on ladder. The Duelist Cup is an entirely different case. Floowandereeze has proven to be, not only in my experience, but also if you look at Master Duel meta and look at the decks that have made top cut so far, that have made max level so far, Floowandereeze does make up a significant portion of them. It seems like around Duelist Cup time, this is a strategy that a lot of people will turn to because it's not only good in its own right, but it's also very effective against a lot of meta strategies. And in this meta in particular, where we have a lot of the 60 card decks that are wanting to mill all the stuff to the graveyard, any deck that can run Dimensional Shifter without like having to go out of its way to do so is definitely at an advantage. So we're definitely seeing Floowandereeze you know, take advantage of the particular metagame and just the fact that it is a Duelist Cup. It's also a relatively simple deck to play, which I think is another reason why it sees an increase in play around Duelist Cup time. Maybe there's a significant number of people who don't usually play more competitive or combo-intensive decks that still want to have a competitive deck for the Duelist Cup, and Floowandereeze is a very good pick for that. So the fact that it's consistently seen play, and also that it's Konami has been consistently hitting this deck in small doses, right? There was the Barrier Statue of the Stormwind getting banned, there was Duality getting semi-limited, there was Pot of Prosperity getting limited, and then of course the map going from 3 to 2 as well. There have just been, over a bunch of different ban lists, just constant little minor consistency hits to Floowandereeze here and there, and that's actually a trend I've tended to notice in how Konami is hitting cards in Master Duel. It seems like they tend to favor the minor consistency hits as opposed to hitting like the decks like, you know, power card. I think that's mostly because those power cards tend to be ultra rare, and you know, Konami doesn't want to hit too many ultra rares because then people get back a bunch of UR materials that can make a bunch of decks for free. That means they're not spending money for packs, so on and so forth, which, you know, again, I don't personally think that's how it should be, but that's, again, we're looking at this from Konami's perspective, right? Map to 1 would be a relatively small consistency blow, but the deck still has Terraforming and Advent of Adventure to search it out. And then on top of that, Master Duel ban lists do tend to be more similar to the OCG list, and we do see that Floowandereeze and the Magnificent Map is at 1 in the OCG. Yeah, that's the other thing too, like I said there, the deck does have a lot of ways to search the field spell out, so I think this card going from 2 to 1 is not going to be like, you know, killing the deck by any means. And that's one thing that I see, and that's an attitude that I see a lot of when we have like ban list predictions or talk. Not like we as in us on the channel, but I say we more as like Yu-Gi-Oh players in general. You look at forums, you look at like especially the subreddits. People are can be very visceral about how they want decks to get hit. A lot of people will like very shamelessly say like, oh yeah, this card should be at 0 so that nobody can ever play this deck again. It's like, well, no, that's not the goal of any healthy ban list, right? Like, these decks should still be playable, just not problematic. And I guess my main point here is that putting map from 2 to 1 is exactly that kind of a change, right? Because again, the deck has so many ways to search the field spout. It's like, it's again, it's a minor consistency hit. It will make the deck be less able to have its, like, you know, main. I would consider map to be one of its main and more powerful cards. It'll have it less often, but it's not going to be impossible for it to find it. So And also, given where Floowandereeze is at in the current metagame, I think that's totally fine. I don't think Flo needs a major hit to it. I don't think the deck needs to be killed. I think this would be a totally fine hit. I could see it either way, honestly. I could see it staying at 2, and the deck would still continue to be fine. I could see the hit going to 1, and we'd see the deck be, again, a little less consistent, but still overall fine. So, I think either way, really. Next up, we have Branded Opening. This might seem like a weird one to talk about, but again, when we're thinking about Konami and how they tend to hit the cards in Master Duel, they tend to go for non-URs, lower rarities if possible. Branded Opening is a normal rare, or normal rarity rather, and they also tend to more closely reflect the OCG ban list. So Branded Opening is currently at 2 in Master Duel, 3 in the TCG, and 1 on the OCG, much like our last card, Floowandereeze in the Magnificent Map. My prediction is that this card will go from 2 down to 1. Reasoning for this is that Branded has actually been pretty consistently a lower tier 1/upper tier 2 deck for a while now. Even as all these other decks are coming out, right? Like, Branded was top of the meta alongside Sword Soul for quite a while. Then Runick kind of like, it didn't knock it down to tier 2 right away, but it kind of started to shake up the meta enough that Branded wasn't like clearly one of, if not the best deck anymore. But even despite like Runick coming out, Sprites coming out, Shizu stuff coming out, Branded has pretty consistently held about the same spot in the current metagame. I don't think this is a bad thing. I think Branded is totally fine as a deck, but I do think that Konami will definitely take notice of this, especially because, you know, we have a whole bunch of, I mean, of course there's constantly like new decks coming out, but like Konami, to at least somewhat of a degree, does want to kind of push players to invest gems, read money into the newer decks. So in some ways, they don't tend to do this as blatantly in the OCG as they do in the TCG. TCG, they'll just outright limit and ban cards that are very clear, like, okay, stop playing this deck. There are new decks that are like as, if not more, powerful. But OCG tends to do that a little bit less. But I do still think it is at least somewhat of a reasoning for them to want to hit a card like Branded Opening. So that's the only thing I mean when I say that like Branded Opening has been about, you know, like the same spot on the tier list for a while. I don't think that's an issue, but I think Konami kind of wants people to move. Like, I think they want people to move on a little bit. So this would be a minor consistency hit that would also reflect where the card is on the OCG list. Branded Fusion could possibly, I put possible instead of possibly, whoops. Branded Fusion could possibly see a hit as it's at 1 in the OCG, but because it's a UR, I think it's less likely to get hit. And I honestly almost put like Branded Fusion maybe going to 2 or 1 instead of Branded Opening here, but I thought more about it and it's like, you know, Branded Opening has been at 1 in the OCG for quite a while. I think if they were going to hit it, they would have put it to 2 in Master Duel already. I think Branded Opening is the more likely candidate. As far as what I think about Branded Opening, it's fine at 2. It could even go to 3, honestly. I think this card would totally be fine at 3. As far as Branded in general goes, I don't really think it needs to get hit. I think it's fine for people to have a very consistent like a deck that's consistently stays at the same power level throughout the meta. It will start to get power crept a bit when we start to see Bestials and tier limits, of course, but at the same time, the deck still gets more support after that will start to make it more relevant again. So I really think the deck is fine where it is, and it's going to continue to be fine moving forward. That's definitely what the TCG has taught us, where Branded Fusion and everything is all still at 3. I think everything for that deck is mostly still at 3 from what I know, but Branded Fusion mainly is at 3. Branded isn't really a thing in the OCG because Branded Fusion is at 1, so I think putting Opening to 1 is, again, a fine hit if they want to do that, but I also think it's fine where it is. I think it also could be fine at 3. I see this as a very minor hit that Konami would do, even though I personally don't think it would have a lot of like a bearing on the metagame. Alright, for our next hit, let's go ahead and talk about Spright Jet. So this one I actually kind of debated whether or not I was going to even include it in this list, as I feel like it might be a little too soon for Sprites to get hit by Konami. In their eyes, I think, you know, in my perspective, I do think that Sprites have proven to be enough of a force that they should see some kind of attention on the ban list. So Spright Jet is currently at 3 in Master Duel, 3 in the TCG, and I didn't know this actually until I started doing research on this, or for this video, but it's actually at 1 in the OCG. I didn't realize that it happened at some point. So this card is one that's gotten attention before in like the paper game. It has been hit. Notably, Spright Blue hasn't been hit at all. That's still at 3 in every format. Spright Starter, I noticed, was at 1 in the OCG as well, which is probably why it came in semi-limited to Master Duel, but I don't suspect, especially it being an Ultra, they're actually going to hit Spright Starter. My prediction is that this card will go from 3 to 2. Maybe it'll go to 1, like in the OCG, but I think it's a little soon for that. I think it's probably going to go from 3 to 2, and that's part of my reasoning here. Yeah, as I said here, it seems a bit early into Sprite's lifespan on Master Duels to limit this card, and Master Duel likes their semi-limits. This card being in Super Rare and SR, and already hit in the OCG list, makes it the most likely candidate to get hit from Sprites. It would also be a relatively minor consistency hit, allowing Sprites to still function with all of their Ultra Rares. So, yeah, I did notice that, like, once I saw this card was at 1 in the OCG, I'm like, oh, and it's a super in Master Duel. I think they kind of maybe had that in mind, because, again, you know, as we've talked about, Konami doesn't like to hit ultra rare cards, because that means full refunds, which means players can more easily pivot into another deck or archetype without having to spend more gems, read money. So, it makes sense to me that this card would get hit. Again, I think it's going to go from 3 to 2. I think it's too early for them to just straight up put it from 3 to 1, and then also, you know, as we've tended to notice throughout the year, a little over a year now of Master Duel being a thing and its various ban lists, that they really like to semi-limit cards, especially before just straight up limiting them as well. So, in my opinion, this card could be at 3 or 2. I think either is fine. Like, I don't think Sprites are actually, like, overly powerful, especially once the Ishizu deck started hitting the scene. Like, you know, if variety is what you tend to value in metas, which tends to be the case for me, I think that tier 0 metas can be fun, but I personally like playing a variety of decks in general in, like, any given meta, so I just tend to like metas where there's more of a variety of decks. So we have that now in this meta. That doesn't mean that there's not things that need to get hit, but at the same time, you know, Sprites aren't, like, so overly powerful that I think they need a huge hit just now. I think this card will go to 2. I think it could still be at 3 and it would be fine. I think at 2 it'll be fine as well. Like, this card being at 2, even for pure Sprites, doesn't really mean a lot, and that's really the only deck where this card going from 3 to 2 would actually make a difference. Pretty much every other Spright variant that also uses another archetype probably already only plays 2, if not 1 Jet anyway. That's also a reason why I could see this card going to 1 instead of 2, is that 3 to 2 might not do anything at all, like even in pure Spright. But at the same time, I think 3 to 1 might be a bit of a jump. I don't know. This is a card that I think is going to get hit, but it's one I could really see being at any number, honestly, and I wouldn't be too surprised. 3, 2, or 1. Next up, we have Runick Tip. I'm sure you've been waiting for me to talk about Runicks in some capacity. So, this one I had to think pretty hard about, like, what I really thought Konami would hit and how much in Runick should get hit. Runick is in a really weird place right now as far as, like, its legality. Let's talk about where that is right now. There we go. This card's currently at 3 in Master Duel, TCG, and OCG. And that's mostly true of actually every single Runick card. Runick has not had a single hit in the TCG or OCG. All of its cards are still at 3. And it's not really been too dominant of a force. Now, that is definitely, you know, the fact that we see in the TCG and OCG best of 3 often being the deciding tournament format for Swiss and Top Cut. That's probably why that's the case, as Runick is one of those decks that definitely can get sided pretty heavily against and generally does suffer from there being side decks. So, you know, in an attempt to kind of curb that, Konami during, I think it was the last ban list or was it the one before that? I can never remember, but recently they put the Destruction, Slumber, and Freezing Curses, I think, at 2. Yeah, Flashing Fire is still at 3. They put 3 of the Runick spells to 2, which, like, now, which were weird hits, honestly, and it also makes hitting Runick moving forward very weird, as Konami's not really the type to, like, undo a hit that they just recently made, but, like, with all those spells already at 2, it's like, alright, well, now what do we do? Like, what's the next card to hit? Because, like, I think that, like, I don't know, we'll get into what I think here in a moment. As far as what I think will happen with Runick Tip, I think this card will go from 3 to 2. I think that Konami, again, they don't want to hit ultra rares too much because they don't want to give us back the ultra rare crafting points, but I do think this is one where it's like, it's only one copy, and a lot of the other impactful Runick spells have already gone to 2, and this is really just the next one that makes the most sense. But yeah, you know, for as far as reasoning, like I was saying earlier, Konami hasn't had to hit the Runick at all in the TCG or OCG, and they've only semi-limited a few of the super rares in Master Duel so far. Tip and Fountain are the next obvious choices to hit, but are also ultra rares. Tip to 2 does more to the deck's consistency to Fountain to 2. Fountain to 1 or 0 would outright kill the deck, and this is something I touched on a little bit earlier, and it's something I've touched on in other videos before, but I see so many people say, like, just put Fountain to 1 or 0, just put Fountain to 1 or 0, and it's like, again, this is where we have to separate how we feel about decks versus how we balance decks. How we think about balancing needs to be a lot more objective than it often is, and, like, I know a lot of people don't like Runick and want to see the deck gone completely, but I don't think that's a healthy way to address the deck. I honestly don't. And I do think Fountain to 1 or 0 would just outright kill the deck. 1, maybe the deck could, like, limp on as an engine, but, like, you could never play a dedicated Runick deck again. And I know it's a popular opinion to say, good, people shouldn't play dedicated Runick decks, but, like, I think it's fine to have a mill deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! And honestly, and again, you know, people are going to say, we have mill decks, there's Ishizus, but, like, milling cards to the graveyard, as the Ishizus have proven, and just play an Ishizu mirror match, and you'll realize this quickly, like, there's enough graveyard-based decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! That milling to the graveyard is not an effective strategy to actually win the game if you're purely going to win by deck out. And I think it's fine to have a mill deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! As long as it's not, like, too overpowered, and this is going to be a hot take, I know, but I don't think Runick is too overpowered at all. I think Runick is fine. I think, like, if you look at Runick as a pure quote-unquote stun deck, it's been, like, on a slight and very consistent decline as far as its power level goes in the meta. That's only going to continue to be the case as well, and has already started to proven to be the case. Like, Runick has already taken a huge power hit just by virtue of the Ishizu Shuffler cards existing. We've seen that in Runick Spright, falling very far below pure Spright. Not very, very far, but, like, significantly below pure Spright as the best, like, top tier 1 deck of the meta. And a lot of tier lists are even starting to put Runick Spright at tier 2 now, because, again, Runick is just not very well positioned against the Ishizu Shufflers, and moving forward, we'll see that, again, as the power level of decks overall tends to increase, I think that, in turn, will help balance Runick out. So, my personal thoughts, honestly, as far as Runick Tip in the current meta goes, like, I think the best solution would be to have Runick Tip at 1 and, like, every other Runick card at 3. That's where I think the balance of Runick would be at its best. Because then we still have all of our toolbox stuff is still at 3, and you can still search Fountain off of Hugin, which is more easily disruptible than Tip because Hugin can be negated by Valor, Imperm, any number of monster negate effects. That's where I think Runick would be at its most balanced. But again, I don't think Konami is going to go back on unlimiting all those Runick spells they just semi-limited, so I think the most realistic hit to Runick to expect would be Tip going from 3 to 2. That's, you know, again, feel free to disagree on how you feel about Runick. In fact, I definitely welcome that in the comments. If you have other thoughts about Runick or any of these hits, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments below. But that's where I stand about Runick and how powerful I think it is and what needs to be addressed about it. So, as far as other cards that really need to be addressed, let's talk about Block Dragon. So, I'll say this, it's no secret, I'm sure, that I love Adamantipator, and I've been playing a lot of them, especially lately, but I'm definitely not one of those people who, like, just because I like a deck doesn't mean I think it you know, that it should be around forever. I love Adamantipator. They're also definitely, like, definitely overpowered. Not only in their current state in Master Duel, but, like, when we look to the future and see the Vernu Sylphs, which are very likely coming out very soon, as well as, like, you know, much later down the road, the Super Heavy Samurai is, like, Adamantipator is only going to continue to get more stuff that can support it and keep it afloat as a deck. So, this card is currently at 1 in the Master Duel, 1 in Master Duel, 0 in the TCG, and 3 in the OCG, so definitely the most, like, polarized card as far as like where it's at on different ban lists. It's in wildly different spots in all 3 different formats. My prediction is that Will could honestly be should here. I think this card should go from 1 to 0. I do think there is a chance it actually does go to 0, despite being at 3 in the OCG. So this is a lot of speculation, but Block Dragon and in turn Adamantipator are also currently a meta force in the OCG. As I described, they are using Verdu Sylphs and the latest wave of super heavy Samurai support in order to help them with that. In the interest of curbing the deck there, as well as in Master Duel, it's possible that Konami, I put the instead of that Konami might simultaneously ban Block Dragon in both formats to finally oust the card. I will admit though, this could be wishful thinking. I, of course, think this card should go to 0. Block Dragon is way too powerful. Like, why can you summon it multiple times per turn? Why does it search 3 monsters? Like, if it was once per turn and just searched a level 8 or lower rock monster, like 1, his card would be totally fine. And Adamantipator would be a solid but not ridiculous deck. But unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in. So, yeah, we live in a world where Block Dragon is completely ridiculous and definitely just needs to get banned, honestly. And again, this is coming from someone who loves Adamantipator. I love playing Adamantipator pretty consistently since I've built it. I found it to be one of the most fun decks as far as like what I enjoy playing on Master Duel. At the same time, though, like I said, I am fully willing to admit that this card should not be a thing. It is not fair or balanced in really any way, shape, or form. So again, this card going to 0 could just be wishful thinking, but hoping that they're going to address it in the OCG as well. That would make it more likely they'll address it here in Master Duel. And again, with both formats having ban lists coming out at kind of like similar times, maybe they'll just do a simultaneous hit on both lists. Alright, so some final thoughts as far as the ban list predictions go here. I didn't really touch in this video too much as what I think will come off of the ban list. We really only talked about what was going to get hit and what was going to get banned. As far as like what comes off of the ban list, that's always much more difficult to tell because there are things that like definitely can come off the ban list that Konami for whatever reason just kind of like slowly takes off. And then sometimes Konami will make just an unexpected like card getting unbanned or going from like 1 to 3 or something. But yeah, it's much more easy to predict like what can go on the list as opposed to what can come off of it. Looking at Konami's Master Duel ban list, though, it's kind of funny just to see how many cards are at 2. I'm actually in favor of semi-limiting cards for consistency purposes. I know a lot of people on the TCG side like the TCG method of pretty much only having Malicious at 2, but I think putting cards at 2 to very minorly take down the consistency of a deck is totally fine way to address them. That said, Master Duel does have a lot of cards at 2, and there are a decent amount that could be at 3. These cards, in my opinion, are Altergeist Multi-Faker, Conquistador the Golden Land, Leerless Cobalt Sparrow, Mask Change Shoe, Cyframe Gear Gamma, Raigeki, Sekka's Light, Soul Eating Overraptor, Spellbook of Judgment, Trishula, Dragon the Ice Barrier, and Sword, Soul, Strategist Long. Yeah, that's about a dozen cards that I think could pretty easily go from 2 to 3, and they would be totally fine. Like, it would either have like very little impact on the meta, or it might give this deck that already doesn't see too much play a slight power boost. Particularly like, you know, Altergeist, Multi-Faker, Conquistador the Golden Land, Leerless Cobalt Sparrow, like Altergeist, Eldritch, and like Leerless, or Altergeist, Eldritch, and Leerless. Yeah, I said that right. I think that's all fine. Like, those decks are not doing anything. They can have another copy of good cards. Cyframe Gear Gamma might be one that's like, you could argue maybe should stay at 2, but like, I think the card is fine enough to be at 3. And it would also provide a lot of decks just a generic tool that's really good against the current meta. As far as Sword Soul Strategist Longyan, yeah, Sword Souls are really not doing nearly as much as they did in the past. Like, this card can definitely come back from 2 to 3. This is a card where, like, I don't really know why this card really went to 2 at all, to be totally honest, but, like, I could kind of see it. I don't know, in Sword Soul's prime, but even by the time Longyan went to 2, that was right around the time when Sword Soul like weren't on the decline necessarily, but you definitely noticed that they were like settling into their like spot in the meta. I don't know. Longyan to 2 is weird. Who knows how many of these will actually come off though. Alright, oh, and of course, because the topic of floodgates always comes up during banlist talk, here's what I think of floodgates in the current meta. I think they're mostly fine at 2 where they are right now. I think floodgate decks are really, like, they really haven't been seeing too much play. Like I said, you know, the quote-unquote pure Runick, the stun variant, is honestly on a slight, and has been on a slight decline as far as its power level goes. Floodgate decks, like, they are annoying in a best of 1 meta, but they haven't really proven to be overly dominant, even in, like, the Duelist Cup, for example, where you would think that, like, people who are really wanting to play anti-meta are going to just turn to Floodgate decks, and they will do so en masse. But instead, you know, we still see, I mean, we see like Floowandereeze, like we talked about earlier, see an uptick in play, but for the most part, it's still decks that are like already represented in the current meta are what's making up what we see in the Duelist Cup. And I feel like the fact that we don't see a significant jump in stun decks being played and doing, well, I don't know about even being played, but in hitting max level consistently, like is an indicator that they're probably fine where they are. I do still think that skill drain and there can be only one. I think those two in particular could probably go to 1, and that would be a good thing for the game overall. But I don't think them being at 2 is killing the game by any stretch of the imagination. As far as the Ishizu cards, I know that's another thing that people are probably going to address in the comments. It's still much too early to hit them. They just came out, so there's no way Konami is going to hit them. Though I do think that Agito will go to 1 sometime in the relatively near future, given that it's a super rare, it's an SR here in Master Duel, and it's also limited in both the TCG and OCG. So that is the one where I could see, okay, that one probably sometime soon, not this ban list, but probably the next one or the one after. Probably the one after, honestly. I could see it going to 1 at that point in time. And I think that's pretty much all the thoughts that I have about the potential ban list changes. So let me know definitely what you think of these predictions in the comments below, as well as leaving your own down there as well. I absolutely do want to hear from you as far as that goes. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now, so without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.